I would notice over the years, no matter where I was working, whatever market I worked in and whatever station I worked for, there was always that don't make the sponsors, the people paying for the commercials, mad.
I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is a former television news journalist and now candidate for governor of the great state of Arizona, Kari Lake. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Kari, I have to start very obviously. My audience is going to hear former television journalists. They're going to freak out because they don't like journalists. Am I allowed to call you a former journalist without using air quotes? Because, you know, journalists these days, I think you get it.
I came up through the old school of journalism where you told both sides of the story. If there were three sides, you told all three sides and you kept your opinions out. And that's why I walked away from my career. I started in journalism 30 years ago, and that's how you did it. And now we've increasingly seen journalists moving on out, being replaced with propagandists. And I was at the top of my game, #1 in ratings for pretty much my entire time covering Arizona. Most recently, 22 years at the Fox affiliate. #1 that whole time, making a fortune. Had a pretty good life, and then COVID struck, and I realized there are no good guys in the corporate media. If there were good guys, they would have covered ivermectin, told us about hydroxychloroquine. They would have been honest about the election and the corruption involved in that. And I just, I looked up in my career and said, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be part of this. It was getting increasingly more difficult to be honest with the people of Arizona. And if I couldn't speak 100% truth, I didn't want to be part of it, so I walked away. I do think there are some good journalists out there. The ones you're seeing on the corporate media, unfortunately, are mainly propagandists today.
Do you remember a moment that you started getting an inkling of all that? Did it really start with COVID? Or I suspect in 22 years, you probably saw some other hints leading to where we got to today?
You know, the news has increasingly been moving toward the left, obviously, over the past many decades. And I just always felt like, well, as long as I keep what comes out of my mouth, and when I'm being a journalist, I can keep that straight, on the straight and narrow, and make sure that I'm being fair. I can't always be responsible for everybody else that works in the industry, but I know I can be responsible for myself. And I really, truly felt that I could do that for the most part, almost all the time. And so that's what kept me going in my career. You know, there's always that I guess it would be the law of television broadcasting and really any news entity. They want to protect their sponsors. And I would notice over the years, no matter where I was working, whatever market I worked in and whatever station I worked for, there was always that don't make the sponsors, the people paying for the commercials, mad. For example, if a big car company in town, if there was a scandal somehow, it was always, pulling teeth to get management to want to cover something like that. They would maybe cover it if they had to, but it would be a short 20-second version of the story rather than covering it ad nauseum like they would if it was somebody who wasn't a sponsor. And looking back, you see things like that and you go, wow, that's a really dangerous thing, because we saw this during COVID. These news outlets took hundreds of millions of dollars from Fauci and Big Pharma, and you almost saw it happening. You almost saw it like this, like somebody flipped a switch, and they all started talking so positively about the vaccines. And there was no critical coverage of it. Now, I'm not trying to be judgmental on a vaccine, but it is our responsibility as journalists to put out the truth and not to tout a product and not to refuse to cover the dangerous side effects, because the people are counting on truth from journalism. At least they used to. And so when you see all these TV people and newspaper people putting out only the positives and trying to shame people into getting shots but not covering the true side effects, and there are some very dangerous side effects with these shots, I believe they have blood on their hands. And I'm so thankful that I got out before that business started up, because I was watching that happen with horror, knowing specifically people who had terrible side effects and actually blamed relatives' deaths on those shots, and then sitting there and watching journalists tout them and pump them up like they were the greatest thing. I think it's disgraceful and hinging on criminal.
Are you amazed how they can sort of do it right in front of our eyes? I don't know if you've seen that compilation that was going viral for a while. We've shown it a couple times on my show, where they show you all the outros to the commercials, the intros and outros to the commercials on mainstream media, CNN, CBS Morning News, et cetera, et cetera. Brought to you by Pfizer. The same people who are telling you how wonderful Pfizer is the entire time. I thought at one time we were supposed to be skeptical about this stuff.
I saw that compilation. At first, I didn't believe it, because sometimes you see these compilations and you go, that can't be true. But I was just watching, I was leaving North Carolina a day ago, and I was watching one of the major networks morning show, and they were talking about the teen suicide rate and teen mental illness and all of that. And they did a whole segment on it and what to look out for. You know, they didn't talk about what caused a lot of it, which was these draconian shutdowns and lockdowns and quarantines unnecessarily, and the masking of our teenagers, which wasn't needed and caused all kinds of mental problems, and sending them home. They didn't talk about that. They just talked about how we've got teens with a bunch of emotional issues now. And right out of it was an ad for, I forget which big pharma, about a drug for depression and suicide and all of that. And I'm like, wow, it's so obvious once your eyes are woken up to it. But some people just aren't awake yet, Dave.
Some people are not awake. There's a lot of woke people, just not a lot of awake people. That seems to be the problem. You did an event about 2 weeks ago here in Florida. I was going to try to get there, and then something popped up. But you were at Mar-a-Lago with a certain orange man who will play we'll play a quick 10-second clip. Here's what he had to say about you.
But I will say that I think that's going to be one of the great things that I've done, endorsing a woman and helping her get elected, and I think she'll go down as the greatest governor in our country.
All right, so it looks like you've got, or not looks like, you've got the endorsement of Trump. You've done events with him. How does that feel relative to getting into politics for the first time and just the general state of craziness and the circus that is our political machine? Well,
that soundbite you just played was just... It felt really good to hear that, because I do plan on being the best governor Arizona's ever seen. I'll probably be the first governor Arizona's ever seen that truly was in it for the right reasons, to represent the great people of this state. So when he said one of his greatest accomplishments will be to help get me elected, and he knows I'll become the greatest, one of the greatest governors in the country, that made me feel really good, because I'm in this for the right reason. Trust me, there's no reason you'd want to get into the corrupt world of the swampy politics unless you're doing it for the right reason. I'm not in it for the fame. There's no money in it if you're an honest person and you're not trying to, bilk the taxpayers out of their money. I'm just doing this because I love Arizona. And I looked at the field of people who was running, Dave, and I believe this is the last election in this country. If we don't get it right and we don't get some America First people in there running, some honest citizen politicians, I don't know that we'll have a country beyond this election. So I looked at the field of who was running, and it's the typical rhino, career politician, somebody who's run before, lost 20 years ago. We have somebody who's run before and run against Katie Hobbs, who's going to be the Democrat socialist that we end up running against. And he already lost to her a few years ago. So I looked at the field of Republicans running, and I said, not a single one of them can get us past the finish line. And if we lose this election and we get a Katie Hobbs, who is a socialist Democrat, we will lose Arizona. And we cannot, as a country, afford to lose another border state.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.